I stated before that the soul of a race or of a people knows its destiny, and this is intuitively, though vaguely, perceived by the foremost of the race or the people. We saw that the Jewish soul speaks an eternal language, and we saw, on the other hand, that the soul of the non-Jews speaks a temporary language. On this subject alone much can be written, but I will conclude this chapter with a reference to one case that is very significant. Of all the Aryan geniuses that concerned themselves with the destiny of the Aryans, and especially with the destiny of the German people, the greatest was Goethe. On this subject he spent his whole creative life, and the result of his think-ing he embodied in his great work, Faust. Faust symbolizes the Aryans in a general way, but the German people in particular. Faust spent many years in an earnest endeavor to fathom the depth of existence and the destiny of mankind. He studied all sciences, delved into mysticism, and reflected on existence. But nowhere did he find light and happiness. In despair, he sold his soul to Mephistopheles, and this he did only for the sake of a moment's happiness. Numerous and varied were the adventures of Faust in company with Mephistopheles, but hard as he tried to drink from the cup of pleasure, like Tantalus, all pleasure eluded him. At last he became old, reaching the age of 100 years. 100 years spent in a strenuous and earnest endeavor to enjoy a moment of happiness, but all in vain. At last Faust saw a beautiful vision. There he saw a foul swamp that infested the neighborhood and brings death to living beings. The idea occurred to Faust. If this swamp could be cleared, the ground cleared, it could become the abode of men, women, children, and cattle, and all would enjoy life. He saw the vision of a free people living on a free soil. What for? 100 years Faust sought in vain. At last he grasped it. He grasped the ideal which alone could give him the happiness he sought. In joy he exclaimed, "To this moment I must say, stay, you are so beautiful. In anticipation of such high bliss, I already enjoy the highest moment." But no sooner did he utter these words, and he died. What does Goethe reveal to us? This is very profound and significant. Faust, symbolizing the German people and the Aryans, tells us the history and the destiny of the Germans and the Aryans. For thousands of years the Aryans will work, struggle, and achieve. They will clear the swamps, they will bring out a beautiful world, and make mankind a free humanity living on a free earth. But then the Aryans will die. They will die as Aryans and will be born again as Jews. Not as Aryans will they enjoy the fruit of their labor, but as Jews. This was already foretold by Noah. The Aryans will enlarge and beautify the earth, but they will settle to enjoy the world which they created only in the tents of the Jews. These tents are communism, internationalism, the universal brotherhood of man, the emancipation of the working class and the human society, a society of free and morally autonomous rational human beings. The destiny of the Aryans is to become Jews, to recognize Jehovah and to identify themselves with him. Thus we see that Goethe revealed the destiny of the Aryans. But notice carefully this. Goethe saw no further than the death of Faust. He did not see beyond, for the Aryans cannot see deep into the future. Only the Jews saw the future of the races and the nations. What an infinite distance there is between Goethe and Isaiah. Nonetheless, great credit is due to Goethe that he could see so far. And so we see that the situation for the Jews is not so hopeless as it appeared at first. On the contrary, from a small people the Jews have grown into the whole human race. May the Jews suffer, and may they be decimated again and again. They will survive all, because they are the holy seed into which Jehovah implanted the tree of eternal life. And the rest of mankind will become eternal only by identifying themselves with this tree of eternal life. The Jewish people. For thou art a holy people unto Jehovah thy God. Jehovah thy God hath chosen thee to be his treasure out of all the peoples that are upon the face of the earth. Jehovah did not set his love upon you, nor choose you, because ye were more in number than any other people. For ye are the fewest of all peoples, but because Jehovah loved you. Deuteronomy 7:6-7. When the Supreme Being gave to the nations their inheritance, when he differentiated the children of men, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the children of Israel. For the portion of Jehovah is his people, Jacob the lot of his inheritance. Deuteronomy 32, 8-9. 63. Who are the Jews? And, first, what the Jews are not. The Jews are not a nation in the usual sense of the term. A nation is a people organically bound up with a definite territory, over which the people exercise exclusive sovereignty. They make their own laws, administer justice, coin money, maintain an army and navy, make war and enter into treaties with other nations. Take away the people from the territory, or deprive the people of sovereignty over the territory, and the nation becomes a people. It loses the attributes of a nation. Now, the Jews have no territory of their own, and they do not possess the attributes of a nation. The Jews, therefore, are only a people. A reference to the Bible will show that the Jews were always referred to as a people, and not as a nation. And an understanding of the history and destiny of the Jews will reveal the fact that the Jews were not intended to be a nation. But what constitutes the Jews as a people? It is their identification with Jehovah and Judaism. Take away from the Jews Jehovah and Judaism, and they cease to be Jews. Judaism and the Jews never attached any importance to race, color, and blood. Anyone embracing Judaism and identifying himself with Jehovah became a Jew to all intents and purposes, and then the Jews freely intermarried with him. The Bible shows that the Jews freely intermarried with people of other races, colors, and blood, provided they embraced Judaism and identified themselves with Jehovah. The history of the Jews abounds in cases in which non-Jews embraced Judaism and identified themselves with Jehovah, who became outstanding intellectual and spiritual lead heirs among the Jews, and whom the Jews to this day held in the highest esteem and reverence. On the other hand, a Jew who abandons Judaism and Jehovah and embraces another religion and identifies himself with another God, may he be the son of a Moses, is entirely cut off from the Jewish people and is regarded as dead. The Jews always insisted on the purity of blood, not in a racial sense, but in the sense of sexual purity. All were welcome to embrace Judaism and become part of the Jewish people. But once one embraced Judaism, he was required to live up to the rigorous sex purity of Judaism. What was true of race, color, and blood was equally true of culture. The Jews were always international, and they always freely absorbed the cultures of other races and peoples, yet they always insisted on the integrity of their own culture. The case of the Jews is neither unique nor exceptional. This is true of all peoples that are identified in a religion or in an ideal. For instance, Christian ity or communism never attached any importance to race, color, or blood. Anyone embracing Christianity or communism, no matter what be his race, color, or blood, becomes a Christian or a communist to all intents and purposes. And this arises from the fact, as we saw before, that all religions and ideals that arise from reason or the intellect transcend the natural biologic law. In their case, race, color, and blood are no longer factors. 64. The Jews always regarded themselves to be the chosen people, and for this they were hated. But strange to say, the Nazis copied even this from the Jews. The Nazis regard the Germans as the chosen people. Well, we will be generous and allow them to enjoy this distinction, but we must make clear in what sense the Jews regarded themselves as the chosen people. First, we must notice this. The Jews did not claim that they chose themselves for some great historic function, but they maintained that Jehovah chose them to perform a great historic function. The Jews had nothing to say about this choice. Then the question arises, why did Jehovah choose the Jews, the smallest people on earth? This we shall presently see. When we contemplate existence as a whole, it reveals itself to be like a pyramid, broad and massive at the base, and tapering to a point at the apex. At the base of the pyramid is the infinite inorganic world. Upon the inorganic world is the plant world, above the plants is the animal world, and above the animals is the human world. As we rise from the base to the apex, existence loses in mass but gains in life, consciousness, and understanding. And so, the higher a being is in the pyramid of existence, the more conscious and intelligent it is. The human world is an epitome of existence. The human world is also a pyramid, broad and massive at the base, and tapering to a point at the apex. At the base is the great mass of human beings who possess consciousness, the senses, the understanding, and judgment. Above them are men that attain to intuition, above them are men that attained to reason, and highest of all of them are the exceptional few that attain to the intellect. And now the case tie-in is, has any human being determined the place in this human pyramid? By no means. This was determined by God. Again, has the human race determined its place in the pyramid of existence? By no means. This was also determined by God. God determined the place of everything in existence in the infinite pyramid of existence. Why, then, did God choose the human race to be above the rest of existence? And why did God choose the few men of intellect to be above all men? We shall presently see the answer. The whole of existence has a predetermined history and destiny. The destiny is to reach the perfection of God. Existence moves forward and upward with its apex on the top. With the apex, the pyramid cuts into the unknown and unconquered, discovers more light and approaches ever nearer to its goal, the perfection of God. But at the apex of the human pyramid is the exceptional man, the man who attained to the intellect. Whatever be the aspect of human progress, religious, philosophic, scientific, technical, political, or social, it always begins with the exceptional man. It begins with a Moses, a Plato, a Jesus, a Newton, a Shakespeare, an Edison, and so on indefinitely. One Edison brought out the electric lamp, and physical light was brought to the whole human race. It was so with intellectual and spiritual light. Now, a Moses, a Plato, a Jesus, a Shakespeare, or an Edison did not choose himself. No one determined his mind, his body, the conditions of his existence, and the task that he was to perform. All were determined by God. With absolute truth, these men could say that God chose them to perform their respective functions. It was so with the human race generally, and it was also so with the Jews in particular. They were chosen by God to perform definite functions. And for this purpose God revealed to each of them the function that he was to perform, and for this purpose also God endowed each one with the faculties to perform that function. The Jews were chosen to perform their historic function by Jehovah. Who is Jehovah? We shall see later. 65. And now the question arises, how did Jehovah reveal to the Jews what their historic function is? Before this question is answered, let us consider a more concrete case. How did God reveal to an Edison that his function was to bring out the electric lamp? Did Edison determine of his own accord to achieve this great work? If you look into the matter soberly, you will perceive that each scientist was determined to achieve his particular work by God. It was God that determined his mind and body, the conditions of his existence, the knowledge that he should acquire, the problems that he should solve, and the task that he should perform. If the scientists spoke an honest and rational language, then they would truthfully say that God chose them to perform the tasks that they performed, and for this purpose God gave them all things necessary for the performance of that task. Apply this to the Jews, and you will see that the Jews are absolutely correct when they say that Jehovah chose them for a definite historic function. Jesus said, "No male lights a candle and puts it under bed that no one should see the light, but he will place it on a candlestick that all may see the light." This applies universally. Once a truth is revealed to us, and we cannot keep it back, but we must make it manifest to the world. Once Jehovah revealed to the Jews the destiny of mankind, and the Jews could not keep it back, but had to make it manifest to the rest of mankind. Throughout their past, the Jews endeavored and struggled to make manifest this great truth. They sent out prophets and apostles to reveal this truth to mankind. As a result of this, Christianity, Mohammedanism, Marxism, and other ideas and ideals spread among mankind. It is in this sense that the Jews regard themselves the chosen people of Jehovah. Other peoples can with equal justice and right claim that they, too, were chosen by God to perform definite functions. And, indeed, they do claim that they were chosen by God and that they have a definite destiny. Even the Nazis claim that the Germans have a destiny. But destiny, this is only another name for God. Every great man believed in destiny, although not always consistently. But the Jews are a unique people. Their uniqueness consists in this: they are a historic people. Hegel tells us that history begins then when men become conscious of history and begin to concern themselves about history. Prior to that time, like other living beings, mankind passed through a process of evolution, but it was not history. We already saw that the Jews are the only people that know whence they came, whither they go, and what is their historic function. The Jews are the only ones that brought out the Bible, the book of history, the book in which is written the history of mankind from beginning to end. The Jews are a historic people because they are identified with Jehovah, and Jehovah is the God of history. Who is Jehovah? This we shall presently see. Jehovah and Judaism. And Moses said unto Elohim, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers hath sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, What is his name? What shall I say unto them? And Elohim said unto Moses, I am becoming what I am to become. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am become, MG hath sent me unto you. And Elohim spake moreover unto Moses, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, Jehovah, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever, and this is my manifestation unto all generations. Exodus 3:13-15. 66. Jehovah is the God of Israel, to Jehovah they pray, and to Jehovah they look for salvation and their destiny. Who is Jehovah? As we seek to know and understand Jehovah, we must begin with the philosophy of Spinoza, for his philosophy is only an explicit revelation of Jehovah. Spinoza begins with the Absolute. The Absolute is in himself. He has no relation to anything outside of himself, because there is nothing outside of the Absolute and independent of him. The Absolute is the causa sui. He exists eternally and infinitely by eternally and infinitely causing himself to exist. The Absolute is substance. His essence is from himself. The Absolute is life. He is eternally and infinitely living. The Absolute is thought. He is conscious of himself and thinks of himself. The Absolute in nature is prior to the world. This does not mean that the Absolute existed in himself, and then manifested himself as the world. Eternally and infinitely the Absolute manifested himself as the world. The world, therefore, is coeternal and coinfinite with the Absolute. But by nature the Absolute is prior to the world. This means that, while the world presupposes the existence of the Absolute does not presuppose the world. 67. The Absolute is absolute thought, thought without any form. As thought, the Absolute reflects on himself. This self-reflection of the Absolute is the infinite intellect. Whatever is absolute, infinite and eternal is absolute, infinite and eternal in every part thereof. For the Absolute, infinite and eternal cannot be composed of relative, finite and temporary parts, nor can it resolve itself into relative, finite and temporary parts, but eternally and infinitely remains absolute, eternal and infinite in every part of itself. Since the Absolute is eternal and infinite, the infinite intellect is absolute, infinite and eternal. The infinite intellect is the self-reflection of the Absolute. Through the infinite intellect, the Absolute sees itself as substance consisting of infinite attributes. Each attribute expresses the eternal and infinite essence of the Absolute. Like the Absolute, the attributes are each in itself, and bear no relation to one another. All attributes are coeternal and coinfinite. One attribute can neither create nor determine another attribute. Of themselves, the attributes cannot combine together to bring out the world of realities. But the infinite intellect contemplates the infinite attributes in infinite different combinations, and these infinite different combinations constitute the infinite modes, and these infinite modes are the infinite realities in existence. The modes derive their essence from the attributes, but their existence they derive from the infinite intellect. When the infinite intellect contemplates two or more attributes together, a mode comes into existence, and when the infinite intellect ceases to contemplate the attributes together, the modes cease to be. The Absolute reflects himself in the infinite intellect. The infinite intellect reflects himself in an infinite series of infinite reflections, and all reflections involve the infinite attributes of the Absolute and constitute the infinite realities in existence. The further a reflection is from the Absolute, the less perfect and the more corporeal it is. Matter is the furthest reflection, and therefore it is the least perfect and the most corporeal. Thus the material world comes into existence. But, though matter is the least perfect and the most corporeal, it is none the less the Absolute. 68. The world has neither essence nor existence of its own. The world is merely the reflection of the Absolute through the infinite intellect in an infinite series of infinite reflections. The Absolute is absolute thought, thought without form. The form of thought is an idea. The first, eternal and infinite idea of the Absolute is the infinite intellect, and all really ties in existence are nothing else than the infinite ideas of the infinite intellect comprehending the infinite attributes in infinite different combinations. The Absolute, because he is the cause of himself, eternally and infinitely reflects on himself through an infinite series of infinite reflections. The Absolute, therefore, eternally and infinitely renews the process of creation. Should the Absolute cease to reflect on himself, and the whole world will cease to exist. The infinite intellect is both the Absolute and the world. As Absolute, the infinite intellect is unknowable, but as the world, the infinite intellect is knowable through his manifestations in the world. The infinite intellect is God, the creator of the world, and this infinite intellect is Jehovah. Through Jehovah, the Absolute realizes an eternal and infinite aim, and this aim manifests itself in the destiny of every reality in existence. Every reality has a destiny, just as the whole of existence has a destiny. For whatever is absolute, infinite and eternal is absolute, infinite and eternal in every part thereof. Take an acorn. It is a small and perishable reality, yet in its essence there is an eternal and infinite destiny. Suppose we put into the ground this one acorn. In time it will sprout out, and in due time it will become a mighty tree, reproducing the acorn 1,000-fold, 1,000,000-fold. Suppose we remove all other objects, trees, plants, and herbs from the face of the earth. Then this one acorn will reproduce itself in countless billions of oak trees, reproducing acorns infinitely. Suppose from existence all other material realities be removed. Then this one acorn will reproduce itself in infinite oak trees, and the whole infinite material world will assume the form of oak trees and acorns. Thus we see that in every reality there is an eternal and infinite destiny. Once a human being is conceived, in the first germ is already contained the destiny of this human being. This human being may be destroyed, but if it is not destroyed it will in due time attain to the form, nature, and function of a human being. The realization of this destiny constitutes history. We call it evolution, but it is history. The history of existence is nothing else than the realization of the eternal and infinite idea of the Absolute. Let us now consider the material world with relation to history. 69. We saw that through the combination of the infinite attributes by the thought of the infinite intellect the world was brought out. But now, when we come to consider the material world, we must consider the attributes in their modes, for in the material world we do not see the attributes themselves. These modes are matter, space, time, force, motion, gravitation, light, electricity, and the like. All these are eternal and infinite modes of the attributes. And, just as the attributes of themselves cannot combine to bring out modes, so these modes of themselves cannot combine to bring out the material realities. Like the attributes, these modes eternally and infinitely remain the same. They do not go through a process of evolution. They have neither destiny nor history. Like the triangle, these modes eternally and infinitely remain the same. The changes, evolution, and history that manifest themselves in the material world are only the realization of the eternal and infinite idea of the Absolute through the infinite intellect. And so, while matter, space, force, emotion, gravitation, light, electricity, and the like eternally and infinitely remain the same, their combinations go through a process of evolution. They have destiny and a history, but this evolution, destiny and history is the realization of the eternal and infinite idea of the Absolute. But this eternal and infinite idea is the infinite intellect, Jehovah. Hence, Jehovah is evolution, destiny, and history. Jehovah speaks the language. I am becoming what I am to become. This is the language of evolution, of destiny and history. In the whole infinite and eternal existence, only Jehovah is evolution, destiny, and history. Since Jehovah is God, the creator of the world, it follows that Jehovah is the God of evolution, destiny, and history. 70. And now the question is, what is the aim of the Absolute? The aim of the Absolute is to realize himself in the material world, to make the world as perfect as he is, and to bring out material beings that shall know and understand him as infinite intellect. Creation is not from the center of the absolute towards the periphery of the material world, but is from the periphery of the material world to the center of the absolute. It is from implicitness, darkness, chaos, evil, and imperfection towards explicitness, light, order, good, and perfection. View creation from this aspect, we see how out of chaos and darkness emerged creation. We see the dawn of light, life, and consciousness. We see the infinite forms of light and life following one another, rising ever higher toward greater light and more explicit consciousness, until man appears and leads all existence toward infinite light, universal consciousness, and supreme perfection. The ladder of evolution, destiny, and history stands on the basis of the material world, but its top reaches the infinite intellect, Jehovah. The angels of God ascend by this ladder, reach Jehovah and receive divine light, knowledge, and understanding, and then go down to the masses of humanity to enrich them with the divine light, knowledge, and understanding. From time to time, a Moses, a Jesus, a Spinoza ascended to Jehovah and brought down to mankind light, knowledge, and understanding. These immortals saw Jehovah face to face, and what they saw they imparted to mankind in a veiled manner, for mankind were not yet prepared to see Jehovah face to face. Man begins as an animal, but he is destined to attain to reason, become rational and morally autonomous. Then man will be prepared to realize the aim of Jehovah, and this man will realize by attaining to the intellect. The intellect is the soul, wholly explicit, self-conscious, and universally conscious. When man attains to the intellect, he then perceives that his intellect is part of the infinite intellect. That is, he then perceives that his soul is part of Jehovah. He then identifies himself with Jehovah in eternal and supreme intellectual love of Jehovah. This is the destiny of man. Hear, O Israel, Jehovah our God, Jehovah is one. And thou shalt love Jehovah thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. But, while it is the destiny of man to identify himself with Jehovah, it is the destiny of Jehovah to realize himself in man. God, the infinite intellect, has as many names as he comprehends attributes, but God assumes the name Jehovah only when he realizes himself in man. Hence, only on this earth and in man does God assume the name Jehovah. Jehovah is the holiest name of God, because it is the realization of the eternal and infinite aim of the Absolute. When man attains to the intellect and he identifies himself with Jehovah, then man becomes the son of Jehovah. It was for this reason that Moses told the Jews, "They are the sons of Jehovah," for the Jews attain to the intellectual love of Jehovah. The name Jehovah consists of 4 letters, Yod, He, Vav, He. If you look on these 4 letters in the Bible, you will see that the forms of the letters symbolize the physical form of man. The Yod consists of a middle point and 2 lines projecting from it, on the top and the bottom. The Yod symbolizes the head of man containing the brains, the upper line connects man with Jehovah, and the lower line is the spinal cord. The first He consists of a horizontal line and 2 vertical lines. The horizontal line is the shoulder, and the 2 lines are the hands. Next, we have the Vav, which is a prolonged Yod. The Vav symbolizes the medulla oblongata and the spinal cord. Finally, we have the second He, which symbolizes the pelvis and the 2 legs. When the Bible tells us that Elohim created man in the image of Elohim, this is true physically and spiritually. Physically and spiritually, man is the epitome of Jehovah. In man, Jehovah realizes himself, and this realization makes of man the son of Jehovah. Thus we see that Jehovah is the God of evolution, destiny, and history. Bear this in mind, the Bible speaks of many gods, and the Bible recognizes many gods, but the Jews are commanded to believe only in Jehovah. The many gods are the many forces and processes in existence, but only Jehovah is evolution, destiny, and history. By identifying themselves with Jehovah, the Jews identify themselves with evolution, destiny, and history. This is the reason why the Jews are the only historic people, only they know of history and the destiny of mankind. They are the first ones whom Jehovah chose and imparted to them this eternal and infinite idea. But the Jews were chosen, not for their own sake, they were chosen to become the means through whom Jehovah will redeem all mankind. Salvation is of the Jews, but the Jews themselves will realize this salvation only through the salvation of the whole human race. It is therefore the historic function of the Jews to bring salvation to mankind. 71. What, then, is Judaism? Judaism is the perception of this eternal and infinite idea of Jehovah, and the endeavor to realize this idea. In other words, Judaism is the endeavor to bring salvation to mankind. This is the essence of Judaism. All commandments have only the purpose of serving this idea. By the exceptional commandments, the Jews are trained and disciplined to perform their exceptionally difficult historic task. The Jews must be as holy as Jehovah is. The Jews must be a model to all other races and peoples. They must be prophets and teachers to mankind. Since Jehovah is the God of evolution, history, and destiny, it follows that Judaism is the only religion that is evolution, history, and destiny. Like Jehovah, Judaism speaks the language of, I am becoming what I am to become. Judaism is a dynamic religion. It is a religion that relates to the material world, for only in the material world there is change, there is evolution, there is destiny, and there is history. In the transcendental world there is no change, no evolution, no destiny, and no history. The transcendental world is the world of perfect ideas. Take, in illustration, the triangle. Look at the triangle. What do you see? You see eternity. You can see in the triangle neither beginning, nor end, nor change, nor evolution, nor destiny, nor history. Through eternity, through infinite time, space, and matter, the triangle was, is, and will remain the same. The language of the triangle is, I am. This is the language of eternity. Eternity is static and perfect, and as such it is beyond history and beyond morality. Morality relates only to the material world, the world of chaos, darkness, evil, and imperfection. The function of morality is to convert chaos into order, darkness into light, evil into good, and imperfection into perfection. Morality is conduct in the material world. Conduct relates to the future, for the consequences of conduct realize themselves in the future. The future may be the next moment, the next day, the next year, or the next 1,000 years, but in all cases conduct relates to the future. Morality implies the overcoming of obstacles and difficulties. Morality implies work, struggle, and suffering. Morality is conformity with the eternal and infinite law of equivalence. Existence rests on the law of equivalence. There must be a quid pro quo. For everything we get from existence we must pay an equivalent, and this equivalent we must pay in coins of work, struggle, and suffering. We must work for the material means of life, we must struggle for intellectual attainments, and we must suffer for spiritual excellence. Judaism is a religion that requires work, struggle, and suffering. Judaism declares, man can be justified only by deeds. Faith alone is not enough. To identify oneself with Jehovah through Judaism, one must constantly work, struggle, and suffer. Judaism is not only the only historic religion, but it is also the only moral religion. Judaism prescribes rules for conduct in all cases. There is nothing a Jew can do which is not prescribed in the Bible how the Jew shall do it. Noblesse oblige. Nobility of birth, nobility of position, and nobility of function require nobility of conduct. The Jew cannot eat, he cannot drink, he cannot dress, he cannot do a thing, unless it is in accordance with the commandments prescribed by Judaism. Next, we must bear in mind that Judaism rests upon a covenant, the eternal covenant, between Jehovah and the Jews, and anyone that wants to embrace Judaism must accept this covenant. A covenant imposes duties and obligations, and one that wants to enjoy the benefits of this covenant must first perform the conditions and requirements of the covenant. Once one enters into a covenant, he cannot abrogate the covenant without the consent of the other party to the covenant. Since the Jews entered into this covenant with Jehovah, the Jews cannot abrogate this covenant without the consent of Jehovah, and Jehovah swore that he will never abrogate the covenant. And so, whether the Jews want it or not, they are eternally bound by this covenant. And Jehovah said, "As I live, I will rule over you with a strong hand." And Jehovah does rule over the Jews with a strong hand. When the Jews relax in the performance of the covenant, Jehovah punishes them severely and compels the Jews to return to their historic task. Judaism is a historic religion, it is a moral religion, and for this reason it is a hard religion. But the law of equivalence reads both ways. just as we must pay an equivalent for whatever we get from existence. So, once we did pay the equivalent, there is nothing in existence that can deprive us from what we justly earned. The Jews had a hard task, they always suffered, but their reward is absolute and immutable. Nothing that can pass in infinite existence can rob the Jews of the reward which awaits them. Since Jehovah, the God of evolution, of destiny and history, chose the Jews to perform this great historic task, may the rest of the human race combine against the Jews and endeavor to destroy the Jews. The Jews will not be destroyed. Rather, their enemies will be destroyed. Judaism and the Jews are unique. There is no religion like Judaism, and there is no people like the Jews, and all this is because Jehovah is unique. There are infinite forces and processes in existence, but only Jehovah transcends them all, comprehends them all, and determines them all, for Jehovah is the eternal and infinite idea of the Absolute, the idea that realizes itself in the world and the human race. That we may thoroughly realize all this, we will consider other religions and their gods. I begin with the side ration of Buddhism. Buddhism and Christianity, the riddle of the world. Proclaim it boldly who can. Who made the heavens, then, and who, forsooth, quick-feeling man? No gods were there to say, who then can know or half foretell the unraveling of this mighty universal spell? Whether by will or of necessity arose the earth, he of his heaven alone can tell, who knows not death nor birth, or haply even he knows not. Vedic poem. The universe, that is the all, is made neither of gods nor of men, but ever has been and ever will be an eternal living fire, kindling and extinguishing in destined measure, a game which Zeus plays with himself. Heraclitus. 72. Buddhism is a religion without a god. It begins in the middle of the story, ends in the middle of the story, it lives, moves, and has its being in an unknowable. It does not know whence, it does not know whither, and it does not know what. For Buddhism negates the material world, it negates the body, and it negates the mind. All existence is an illusion. Human existence is an illusion and inherently evil, and there is no hope for living men on earth. Buddhism does not know of progress and destiny for mankind on this earth. The only thing man can do to free himself from the inherent evil of existence and suffering is to emancipate himself from the illusion of existence. He must negate the will to live and strive after nirvanam. Nirvanam, this is the state of the perfect idea in the transcendental world. There is no motion, no change, no time, no desire, no evolution, no history, and no destiny. It is a state of I am. One that attains to this enlightenment must renounce this world and life. He must not concern himself about the material body, he must not till the land, he must not produce the material means of life, he must not concern himself about his physical needs, and he must not seek deliverance through suicide. Since he must continue to exist on this earth in a physical body, and the physical body, so long as it lives, needs material things, the enlightened one must take up the beggar's bowl and live on beggary. Not only must he negate the material world and the body, but he must also negate the intellectual world and the mind, for even they are an illusion. He must train himself not to think. Living on beggary, in filth and dirt, expiating for the mistake of having come into existence, he must wait until the illusion of existence comes to an end, and then he will be free to enter into the state of nirvanam. We shall see later that Buddhism embodies a deep truth. But for the present we must notice this. Buddhism is both unhistoric and unmoral. Buddhism knows of no history, and it knows of no morality. Morality is nothing else than conduct in this material world that has its aim to convert chaos into order, darkness into light, evil into good, and imperfection into perfection. And all this must be accomplished right here on this material earth and while we exist in our physical body. Since, however, Buddhism regards all this an illusion and negates all this, it negates morality. Whatever morality there is in Buddhism relates to the transcendental world, where there is no morality. Again, since history pertains only to the material world, Buddhism is unhistoric because it negates the material world. Thus we see that Buddhism is unhistoric and unmoral. Let sentimentalists and misguided idealists extol Buddhism to the sky. They do not know what they are talking about. By the fruit ye shall know. Buddhism not only degenerated to the grossest superstitions, but it destroyed in the followers of this religion all power to resist evil and to struggle for a better human world right here on this earth. And what is true of Buddhism is equally true of Brahmanism. And what is the result? More than 350 million Hindus are ruled, oppressed and exploited by a handful of Englishmen, and the Hindus cannot shake off the yoke of oppressors and exploiters. All they can do is to follow a leader who by prayers and fasting hopes to accomplish the miracle of freeing the Hindus from the yoke of the English. So much for Buddhism. And now we come to Christianity. 73. Christianity is akin to Buddhism. But having come from Judaism and the Jews, it retains some traces of both, but they are only traces. Christianity has sublimated the God of the Jews into an abstraction, the Father in heaven, and retired him into the background. His place was taken by Jesus. What Jehovah is to the Absolute, this is Jesus to Jehovah. And just as the Jews look to Jehovah for salvation and help, so the Christians look to Jesus for salvation and help. We saw that Jehovah revealed himself as I am, becoming what I am to become. But Jesus revealed himself as I am. I am is the language of the perfect eternal idea in the transcendental world. It is the language of the triangle. Verily, verily, I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am. This is Christianity. Like Buddhism, Christianity does not concern itself about the material world. Its sole concern is the transcendental world. It does not concern itself about morality. Its sole concern is immortality. It does not concern itself about conduct. Its sole concern is faith. A man is justified, not by deeds, but he is justified by faith. Like Buddhism, Christianity negates this material world and the body. There is not a word in the New Testament about human conduct in this material world. Man is to take no thought of the tomorrow of what he shall eat or drink. He shall neither till the land nor spin nor sow, but be like the fowls of the air or the lilies of the field, trusting to the heavenly Father that he will feed them and clothe them. Man is not to concern himself about justice and should not interfere with the ruling classes. Not a word of protest did Jesus utter against oppression, exploitation, and slavery, but advised men to submit to them all. Judaism demands that evil be exterminated, but Christianity rather encourages evil. If one strike me at the right cheek, I must let him also strike me at the left cheek. If one takes off my upper garment, I must also let him take off my undergarment. Marriage is only a concession to lust. But, if one can overcome the lust, he should not marry. Naive Christians tell us that Christianity failed, because the Christians did not live up to the requirements of Christianity. How naive! These naive Christians do not realize that, if the Christians did live up to the requirements of Christianity, there would have been left neither Christians nor a semblance of Christianity. Suppose the Christians did live up to the requirements of Christianity, then they would not till the land, they would not produce the material means of life, they would not spin, they would not sow, they would not wash the body, they would not concern themselves about justice and morality, they would not marry, and they would live in filth and dirt. What would become of them? They would degenerate and perish, and then there would not be a Christian to tell the tale. Christianity was not meant for this world. It was meant for another world, somewhere in heaven, to be enjoyed after death. Christianity does not concern itself about life, but about death. It does not concern itself about existence on this earth, but only about existence in heaven after death. 74. Death is the chief concern of Christianity, and for this reason it rests on a testament. It is conceived in death and exists only for death. Christianity was born only with the death of Jesus. If Jesus had not been crucified, there would have been no Christianity. The basis of Christianity is the resurrection of Jesus and his ascension to heaven. And, while Judaism promises reward on this earth and while we live, Christianity promises reward in heaven and only after death. Jehovah is a living God, he is I am, becoming what I am td become. Jesus is a dead God, he is I am. Jehovah is a living God because he functions in the material world. But Jesus is a dead God, because he is an eternal idea in the transcendental world. The material world is a living, changing, developing, and progressing world, but the transcendental world is a dead world. No change, no evolution, no history, no progress, and no destiny. As stated before, Judaism rests on a covenant, but Christianity rests on a testament. This is no accident. It goes to the essence of these two religions. We must consider the difference between a covenant and a testament. A covenant is between living beings, while a testament is between the dead and the living. A covenant imposes duties and tasks. Once the covenant is made, neither party to the covenant can withdraw from the covenant without the consent of the other. But a testament does not impose duties and tasks. True enough, the bequest in a testament can impose duties and tasks as a condition to the bequest, but the beneficiary is not bound to accept both. He can renounce both the bequest and its conditions. Next, the reward in a covenant can be earned only after the performance of the duties and the task, but in the case of a testament, the beneficiary gets the reward at once. Hence, while Judaism promises reward only in the end of days, and after the Jews will have performed their hard historic task, the Christians attain to salvation the moment they believe in Jesus. The moment they believe in Him, they are saved. It is enough to believe in Jesus to be saved and the sins to be forgiven, but it is not enough to believe in Jehovah to be saved and the sins to be forgiven. One must justify himself with deeds, and with deeds to atone for sins. And, while Judaism is principally concerned about the people, society, and the whole human race, Christianity is concerned only about the soul of the individual. Judaism is social, Christianity is individualistic. Christianity, like Buddhism, is unhistoric. It knows of no beginning and of no end, and it does not know what is its historic function. Christianity broke away from Judaism and became an antagonist of Judaism. Then take away the New Testament from the Jewish Bible, and what will be left? An abstraction like Einstein's chest, hanging in an infinite vacuum. Christianity, therefore, is unhistoric and unmoral. Whatever morality the Christians have is not due to Christianity, and whatever history the Christians know is not derived from the New Testament. 75. Now, Christians will indignantly protest against all that I said about Christianity. They will say that I misstated the facts and misrepresented the truth of Christianity. If it were necessary for me to justify every word I said about Christianity, I could write a big volume. But it is not necessary for me to do this ungrateful task, for it was already done by Christians themselves. And intelligent Christians know very well that a great revolution takes place among Christians themselves. They wake up to the realization of the fact that Christianity is neither historic nor moral, and they try to regenerate and revolutionize Christianity. The literature on this subject is vast, and is well known to intelligent Christians. But for my present purposes, I will call upon 3 Christians to testify, and let them tell you what Christianity really is. The first witness whom I will call to testify is I.M. Haldeman, D.D., pastor, First Baptist Church, Broadway and 79th Street, New York City. Few years ago, he wrote an essay entitled Morality or Immortality. In this essay, Pastor Haldeman endeavors to prove that Christianity has nothing to do with morality. Its sole and only concern is immortality. And now let us hear what he says. Did our Lord Jesus Christ come into the world to make men moral or immortal? I shall answer this question from a basic text to be found in St. Paul's epistle to Timothy, 1st chapter, 9th and 10th verses. Who hath saved us and called us with an holy calling, not according to our works, but according to his own purposes and grace, which was given us in Christ Jesus before the world began. But now is made manifest by the appearing of our Savior Jesus Christ, who hath abolished death, and hath brought life, and immortality to light through the gospel. He that believeth not the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God abideth on him. 76. Pastor Haldeman continues, according to the popular concept, our Lord Jesus Christ came into the world to do good, heal the sick, comfort the sorrowing, set a good example of morality, of strict righteousness, and live a life of thoughtful reverence for, and sincere devotion to, the unseen God. Christianity, it is held, consists in following this example. Like Christ, people are to go about doing good, visiting the sick, looking after the poor and needy, being kindly and cleanly spoken, gentle-mannered and full of brightness and cheer for other lives. In short, a life of perpendicular honesty and unquestioned morality, owning and having reverence for God as the supreme being, but a God bigger and broader than the limited tribal God of Israel, not the Jehovah of a small and comparatively insignificant nation, but a God who, by whatever name he may be called, is, in the final terms, the Father of all men. Such, with more or less modifications, is the kind of Christianity the advanced preacher is preaching. And this is the kind of Christianity, equally more or less modified, the average Christian is trying to practice, or at least holds theoretically. He that believeth not the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God abideth on him. Where does moral character stand in relation to this text? Let it be said you are the most perfectly righteous person who ever trod over the earth, that you have a character in which no one can find a flaw. Say you do not believe in the story about Jesus Christ, you do not accept him at all, even as your best example. Say you do not believe in the Bible as the inspired, infallible Word of God. What then? Why, this text declares that your moral character in relation to your fellow men is of no saving value before God. It warns you that as you die and pass into eternity with all your ethical culture, you enter there under the wrath of God, and this wrath will abide on you forever. 77. Pastor Haldeman continues, what is the modern concept of Christianity in the light of that text but a monstrous and open lie? But now I turn from all hypothecations and suppositions to positive and absolute affirmation. I affirm Jesus Christ did not come into the world to live a merely moral life and do good. I affirm his deeds of benevolence and healing were not objective, and were in no way the superlative of his mission. I affirm his deeds were only incidental to his mission. They were simply the foretold credentials of his mission, the dynamic demonstration that he was in truth what he claimed to be, the long-announced Messiah of Israel and the Lamb of God who should bear away the sin of the world and reconcile it to God. I affirm Jesus Christ did not come into the world to be a reformer, an advanced socialist. Nay, he saw soldiers everywhere. Everywhere he heard the tramp of armed men returning from the field of battle. He said no word against war. On the contrary, he warned men that he had not come into the world to bring peace, but a sword, that his coming would put men at variance with one another and bring a bloody controversy concerning himself. He saw corruption in government. He was born and lived under one of the most corrupt. He organized no movement of reform against it. Instead, he commanded those who lived under it to pay their taxes and therefore support it. He saw slaves under the whiplash. He saw men toiling for a stipend. He made no effort to liberate the slave, uttered no incendiary word that would stir up revolt, even dissatisfaction, but bade them put their hands upon their mouths and their mouths in the dust and say, "We are unprofitably slaves." He did not start a campaign for the amelioration of the voluntary laborer nor suggest an increase of wages. He saw abject poverty. And yet, when a young woman broke an alabaster box, pouring its contents of costly perfume upon him, he rebuked those who rebuked her, those who called it a waste, would have sold it and the proceeds given to the poor, by justifying the expenditure upon himself, bidding the necessities of the poor to wait. I affirm the average Christian is in the dark as to the whole truth of God, and that the great mass of mankind today are on the verge of imminent peril by reason of the false preaching that morality is Christianity, or that the supreme objective of Christianity is an ethical or moral life. 78. Thus spake Pastor Haldeman D., a high dignitary of the Christian Church. Could I put the case any stronger? What Pastor Haldeman says about Christianity is the truth. Christian ity is not concerned about morality. Its sole concern is immortal ity. This is clear. Morality relates to this material world, and its purpose is to promote our well-being on this earth. But Christianity negates the material world and the life on this earth. Therefore, Christianity is not concerned about morality. Pastor Haldeman wants the Christians to stop thinking of morality and think only of immortality. And now I will call upon another witness who will condemn Christianity just because it negates the material world and morality. This witness is Professor John McMurray of University College, London. He wrote an essay entitled Creative Society. In this essay, Professor McMurray shows that what passes as Christianity is a superstition and a fraud, just because it negates the material world and morality. Professor McMurray believes that true Christianity, like Judaism, concerns itself only about the material world and morality. He therefore demands the destruction of the existing Christianity and bring out a true Christianity, but this regenerated and true Christianity must identify itself with Marxism and communism and concern itself only about this material world and morality. I will now let Professor McMurray speak to you. Christianity, in fact, seems to inhabit the ethereal region which is widely separated from the human conflicts by which the fate of men and nations is decided, and it takes God with it out of the world. If we cannot define our Christianity in such a way that it can determine for us a clear program of action through which we can claim the future as our own and fight for its possession, then we ought, without hesitation, reject Christianity completely and find another faith to fight for. Belief in God is properly an attitude to life which expresses itself in our ways of behaving. If we wish to know what it means to believe in God, we must ask ourselves what this practical attitude is and how it expresses itself. We are concerned with actions, not with professions, and we have repeated warning from the teaching of Jesus that the divine judgment pays little attention to professions and is likely to have surprising results. I cannot help feeling that communism, whatever its exponents may say, has recovered that essential core of a real belief in God, which organized Christianity has in our day largely lost. For the communist movement started when Marx said, "Let us turn from ideas to reality. Let us look not at people's theories but at their actions." It is by seeing how societies and their institutions work in practice, and not by accepting their ideal accounts of what they are, after that we shall understand their real faith. Pseudo-religion takes the truth of real religion and isolates it in an ideal heaven, completely divorced from the material reality of common action, and floods with the colorful lights of primitive fantasy. Such a process, by establishing illusion in the mind of men, establishes in reality their isolation and their slavery. 79. Professor McMurray continues, in world history the Hebrew people is unique, and it is unique because it is the only people whose history is religious through and through. It is this which makes the history of the Jews both the unsolved problem of history and the clue to its inner meaning. The characteristic of Hebrew religion which makes it unique in history is its intense and continuous realism. This realism shows itself peculiarly in the absence of a doctrine of immortality and in the absence of otherworldliness. For the Hebrew religion remained the great organizing principle of social life, capable of unifying every aspect of individual and social activity. It never became a particular aspect of human life, relating men to a human existence transcending the earthly life. Hebrew religion, in fact, was intensely materialistic, and it is precisely this that gave it persistent and effective reality. It adapted itself continuously to the material and social changes in the development of Hebrew history, and so maintained the condition of religious evolution. The effect of this was to drive into the consciousness of the Hebrews the belief that the basis of social success lies in social righteousness. It was this intimate connection between their religion and the whole of their material life as a nation that forced upon them as their contribution to culture the development of an understanding of the moral basis of social life, which expresses itself formally in the development of the conception of God. Every national failure was traced to a failure to maintain that social righteousness which was the basis of God's favor, so that the process of Hebrew development became the process of discovering the spiritual basis of human community. 80. Professor McMurray continues, the development of the teaching of Jesus is centered from the beginning in the idea of the kingdom of heaven. The development has two aspects. It is, in the first place, the discovery of the real meaning of the kingdom of heaven. It is, secondly, and consequently, the discovery of the condition of its establishment on earth. These two discoveries taken together form the realization of the meaning of the religious impulse in man and, therefore, constitute a program for the conscious development of human society. In trying to understand the revolution which Jesus accomplished in himself and for the world, we must bear constantly in mind the distinction between the religion of reality and the religion of illusion. The kingdom of heaven remains what it was for his predecessors, a kingdom on earth, constituted from the normal, everyday elements of human life. It is in the universalization of religion that it is most apt to lose reality and become unconsciously
Pseudo-religion.
One is through the translation of reality into the field of idea and imagination. The other is through the consequent divorce of the idea from practical action, and involves the glorification of material power as the basis of social order. These two forms of pseudo-religion are exemplified in the two great universal religions which still contest the claim of Christianity, Buddhism, and Mohammedanism. Both the religions which achieved universality by a loss of reality. To achieve universality, Buddhism had to represent the world of material active ity as illusory, while Mohammedanism had to represent it as the field of physical force. Buddhism achieved a merely ideal spirituality, Mohammedanism merely an idealized materialism. These two tendencies may be seen at work throughout the history of Christianity itself. It is always tending to become a religion of illusion, either by an approximation to Buddhism, that is to say, through a divorcing of the spiritual world from any earthly reality, or by an approximation to Mohammedanism, in which it thinks to establish the kingdom of heaven by the use of physical force. The supremacy of the religion of Jesus lay in its capacity to remain fully material and yet to achieve universality. Its success lies precisely in its universal concreteness. It is this above all that we have to understand. 81. Professor McMurray endeavors to show that Jesus had in mind nothing else than what Marx had in mind, and which was all through a Jewish idea. He then tells us the following: the eternal aspect of human life is, in fact, nothing transcendental or otherworldly. It is the simple fact that the process of human development is real only as the life experience of individual human beings. The life of any human being is lived and its general form determined by a set of conditions, amongst which the social structure into which he is born holds the most important place. And the form of this process is primarily determined by the relation of man to his material environment. This is the temporal aspect of human life. But throughout all his variations of local and temporal circumstances, there is something that is unchanging. The reality of human life lies in the individual experience of men and women. The human individual must relate himself to his material environment to provide for himself the necessities of his physical existence. He must also relate himself to his fellows to fulfill the social character of his nature as a human being. This is the eternal aspect of human life. The development of society is the development of this form. Real religion is never idealist. It is never supernatural or otherworldly. This is not a matter of mere theory. The religion of Jesus was not ideal, as our study of it clearly shows. It seems to me clearly written in history that religion has often been the driving force of a social revolution which would have been impossible without it. But the plainest historical evidence for the effectiveness of religion as a positive social form lies in the history of the Jews. Scattered throughout the world under the greatest possible variety of economic, social, and political conditions, the Jews retained their unity as a distinct people without any common basis of territory or economic organization to support it. Marx realized that there could be no solution to the Jewish problem short of the solution of all the great social problems through the establishment of a universal human society. He did not realize that the reason for this lies in the fact that the Jews are the one actual religious community in the civilized world, and that the solution of the Jewish problem and of the problem of universal community is one and the same, the universalization of real religion as the basic expression of the eternal nature of all human fellowship in reality. 82. Professor McMurray continues, Christianity is the source of communism, and communism has moved into dialectical opposition to Christianity through the process by which Christian ity in its conscious form has been divorced from material reality. A Christianity which withdrew its beliefs from association with the temporal reality of earthly life must inevitably produce out of itself a temporal theory which divorces itself from the eternal and spiritual reality. The clear separation of these not merely as opposing theories but as antagonistic forces in the field of social development is the necessary prelude to their synthesis in a Christianity which has become real at the full height of its mature development. The separation of communism and Christianity into conscious antagonism means that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. When the full nature of Christianity is realized, we recognize at once that the whole communist theory, insofar as it is positive, falls within Christianity. The synthesis of communism and Christianity is only to be achieved by the reformation of Christianity through a thoroughgoing attack upon all perverted forms of Christianity itself. The first step of all, on which everything else turns, is the total rejection of idealism. The question at issue is this: what and where are the real objective facts to which our ideas and beliefs refer? Do they refer to the substantial, everyday life of the world around us, or do they refer to another life or another world which lies somehow beyond or outside this life and this world? Idealism is profound irreligious, because it is the perversion of religion into unreality. The real world is the world in which we act. The ideal world is the world in which we dream. The effective renunciation of idealism is the first step towards recalling Christianity to reality. Professor McMurray then concludes with the following: the answer which I would give to Christians who ask what they must do would be this: attack pseudo-Christianity openly and resolutely in all its forms, in the name of real Christianity. The religious revolution is the immediate and special responsibility of the Christians. Unless we can vindicate the substantial material reality of our religion, we are powerless to do anything effective. There must be war to the death between real and unreal religion, even if it should cleave organized Christianity in two and destroy all its existing forms. That is the primary task, and it has to be achieved concretely in terms of the Christian denunciation and criticism of the existing structure of society, in its effects upon the lives of men and women. At present, that criticism is either divorced from Christianity altogether, or, where it is associated with Christianity, it is in such general and emotional terms that it means nothing definite. It is only by making it at once definite, detailed, and circumstantial, and grounding it in the clear principles of the Christian conception of true human society that we shall discover for ourselves what Christianity really means, and be able to detect and to destroy its perversions of idealism and power. 83. I regret that space does not permit me to quote still more copiously from this essay of Professor McMurray. All that I can say is that the reader will do well to procure this and other essays of Professor McMurray and study them carefully. They are published by Eddy and Page, 347 Madison Avenue, New York City. When we now reflect on the views of Pastor Haldeman and Professor McMurray, we clearly see they differ fundamentally about the nature of Christianity. According to Pastor Haldeman, Christianity is not concerned about this material world and morality, while according to Professor McMurray, Christian ITY is only concerned about this material world and morality. But Professor McMurray does not speak of the Christianity that existed and exists. He speaks only of the Christianity that Jesus had in mind, but which never existed. Professor McMurray now wants to bring into life the Christianity of Jesus, which however never existed. I shall not stop to consider the question, who of them is correct in his view about the nature of Christian ITY, but this is perfectly clear. Whatever idea Jesus had about the kingdom of heaven, the Christianity that resulted never concerned itself about this material world and morality. And according to Professor McMurray, for this reason, Christianity was only a pseudo-religion, and not a real religion. I have yet a third witness to testify on the nature of Christianity, and this is Conrad Noel. He is a priest of the English Catholic Church, and a member of the Order of the Church Militant. He wrote a book entitled The Life of Jesus, which was published by Simon & Schuster, 1938, New York City. 84. Like Professor McMurray, Conrad Noel proves that the Christianity which existed and exists was and is a perversion of the doctrines of Jesus. The central idea of Christianity is the kingdom of heaven. For thousands of years, the Christians were taught by the church and priests that the kingdom of heaven was to be a kingdom in heaven to be enjoyed in heaven after death. But at no time did the Christians make an attempt to find out whether this was really the idea of Jesus. And now, after 2,000 years of Christianity, Conrad Noel takes up the original question, which was never asked, and therefore never answered, namely, what did Jesus actually mean by the kingdom of heaven? How can this be ascertained? Conrad Noel made a daring step to ascertain the truth. This is what he did. He started out with the following premise. Jesus spoke to the Jews, he spoke in their language, and expressed ideas which they understood. He spoke to the Jews of the kingdom of heaven, and Jesus did not tell them that his idea of the kingdom of heaven differed from their idea of the kingdom of heaven. He spoke of the kingdom of heaven as the Jews themselves understood it. And Jesus did not speak to non-Jews about the kingdom of heaven. The question, then, is what did the Jews understand by the kingdom of heaven? It is this question which Conrad Noel undertook to answer. It is a revolutionary question, and therefore the answer is revolutionary. Conrad Noel shows that the Jews understood by the kingdom of heaven nothing else than a kingdom of God which will be realized on this earth, and which mankind will enjoy while they live. There is no doubt that this was the idea of the kingdom of heaven which the Jews always entertained, and which they still entertain. This being so, then when Jesus spoke of the kingdom of heaven, he meant just what the Jews meant. In other words, Jesus actually meant the kingdom of heaven to be realized on this earth, and to be enjoyed by mankind while they live. Since this idea of Jesus is the soul and essence of Christianity, it clearly follows that the followers of Jesus perverted and distorted the idea of Jesus, and Christianity was and is only a perversion and distortion of the idea of Jesus. Since Jesus thought only of a kingdom of heaven to be realized on this earth, it follows that Christianity must identify itself with the material world and cooperate with the revolutionary forces that work for the realization of the kingdom of heaven on earth for living humanity. Conrad Noel reaches the same conclusion which Professor McMurray reached, namely, that Christianity must identify itself with communism. 85. It is now perfectly clear that the Christianity which came down to us was divorced from the material world and from morality. Now, whether Christianity can be revolutionized and be made to concern itself about the material world and morality, and if so, whether it will remain Christianity, this we shall see later. But this is now perfectly clear that I did not misstate the nature of the Christianity that existed and still exists. Thus, the difference between Judaism and the other religions is now definitely established. Only Judaism is a historic and moral religion. All other religions are neither historic nor moral. And the reason is, as stated before, because Judaism is bound up with Jehovah, the God of history. And, because of all this, the Jews are the only people that are consciously historic and moral. And for this reason, the Jewish people are eternal. And here I want to call attention to a fact universally overlooked, even by Jews themselves. It has been universally assumed that the Bible never spoke of immortality. It has also been universally assumed that the Jews acquired this idea during their Babylonian exile, presumably from the Eastern nations. There is truth in this assumption, but it is not the entire truth. We shall presently see that the idea of immortality was with the Jews from the very beginning. Jehovah told Isaac that he was the God of Abraham. To Jacob, Jehovah told that he was the God of Abraham and Isaac. And to Moses, Jehovah told that he was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Was Jehovah the God of the dead ones? Let us see what the Bible tells us about the death of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. See Genesis 25, 8, 35, 29, 49, 33. You will find the Bible using in these three cases the same expression. And he was gathered to his people. To what people? How was he gathered to his people? What does it mean that he was gathered to his people? The answer is this. Right here we are told that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are eternal. This immortality differs fundamentally from the immortality of other races and peoples. The immortality that mankind generally believes is an immortality of the soul in heaven. When a man dies, his soul goes up to heaven and unites with God. The soul comes down to the earth to exist in an embodied form, function through life, and then goes back to heaven where it remains forever. This is not the immortality of which the Bible speaks. The Bible speaks of an immortality right here on earth. In what consists this immortality? It consists in this: the soul continues to live and function through the children and grandchildren and the people descending from them. Hence, when a man dies, his soul is gathered to his people. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and all the rest continue to live in the Jewish people, and in due time they will live in the whole human race. This was the immortal ity of the Jewish people, and it was known to the Jews all the time. When, however, the Jewish people suffered a national catastrophe, and the remaining Jews were exiled to Babylonia, they seemed to have lost hope that the Jewish people would continue to exist. Hence, the Jews adopted the general idea of immortality, which is of an individual nature. It was this idea that the Jews brought back from exile. But with the regeneration of the Jewish people in Palestine, the ancient idea of immortality was also regenerated. And, while most Jews believe in the general idea of immortality, The Jews that have a deeper understanding of Judaism know that the only immortality there is for the Jew is the immortality in the Jewish people. Each Jew continues to live in the Jewish people, and he will continue to live so long as the Jewish people will live. Since the destiny of mankind is to become Jews, it follows that each Jew will continue to live as long as mankind will live. This is the true Jewish idea of immortality.